Yes, greetings in the best of salutations. There would be prayer, peace, power, patience, and prosperity. As you see it in the backdrop, if you can't see it, it's saying, my sister says that God bless the child who got his or her own. I may be saying it wrong. The day of conclusion. The day of conclusion. Yes. Conclusion deals with a something that has come to an end. As far as it can go. And when you have blessed got its own ownership, then you deal with opportunity is a direct correlation of ownership. It's like Annie up, as some artists would say. There is a aim or a responsibility with the as it pertains to the aim or that which you are aiming for. And bless is, for me, a measure of increase, or it could be a measure of decrease. It is a measurement, something that is to be reassured. Some would associate it as a eulogy, to speak well. Look beyond the fault and see the need. Ownership and accountability. And when there is a lack of accountability, still talking about the day of conclusion, when there is a lack of accountability, it is due to a term called moral and cultural decline. It is called recidivism. Recidivism, yes. Someone says about a country called America that it has the seeds of its own destruction. I believe Brother Malcolm X said that. The seed is the potential. So if we are responsible with the potential and the resources that we have in a society, and if we are responsible with it, we will be blessed because we have been blessed with it. The mineral resources, the trees, the use of our faculties, and the use of our limbs and our tongues and our eyes and our senses. But if we have been irresponsible with it, the blessed has become a mess. But to be aware and to reach our full potential with this social responsibility, with the sciences, and with the use of our limbs and our faculties, then we will, take ownership, and therefore we will, take responsibility when it comes to the consequences of our actions. Yes. Yes. So, if we look at the day of conclusion, we see that if there is no more sacredness anymore, that is the sacredness of family, the sacredness of order, the sacredness of duty, the sacredness of responsibility, the sacredness of accountability, the sacredness of honor, the sacredness of integrity, the sacredness of dignity. If there is respect and courtesy, being generous and being kind, if we are not, if we have violated that, then the circle has been broken. Yes. So, I conclude with the technology and the sciences that I feel as though that it has reached its limits, because if it's a day of conclusion, it must be a day of reckoning as well. And when there's a day of reckoning, it will reveal our accomplishments and our failures. Yes. And what we have failed to do is to be responsible with the use of our limbs, the use of our faculties, the use of our resources, the use of the resources of this planet Earth. Yes. Which is a sociological structure. And the earth does have an appetite. It is an absorbent. But many have been seduced and having an appetite for money, wealth, power, and greed to exploit the resources and the use of our faculties and the use of the limbs and so forth and so on, whereas that it has sowed a seed of destruction. Destruction. There is another song say we're headed for self-destruction. Yes. So I say that society is under social reconstruction, whereas our feelings are becoming desensitized, our thoughts demoralized, our attitude dehumanized, our communication devitalized, and our activity has become destabilized. So therefore we're dealing with a spirit of apathy, because one's true potential now is not to reflect carelessness and callousness, to transition from sympathy to empathy. Yes. And if we do not do that, then we know that we're dealing with some type of mentality that one has become very mentally incapacitated and very delusional. And when one becomes mentally incapacitated and very delusional, then he or she is under a spell. And if he or she is under a spell, that he or she does not know how to reason. And when someone does not know how to be reasoned, then some would say that they are possessed because there is a demon that is present. They're talking about what we call a demonic force. Yes. Yes. Because the possession, 9/10 of the law, they call it possession. Possession, that means that one wants to control the manner and the way in which one thinks and control the means of the resources and misappropriately use those resources to fill their storehouse with wealth, while the storehouse of the masses of people, the cupboard, is bare. Yes. So, the day of conclusion. And if you look at it in a sense of being irresponsible with the use of our time, our faculties, our limbs, and our resources, because we may not have the correct interpretation and the correct attitude about ourselves and about life. The correct interpretation, if you look at the cosmos and so forth and so on, it is in harmony with one another, the sun, the moon, and the stars. But yet, the best body of knowledge is creation itself. Yes. So it creates a constitutional value. Huh? And when you understand that the creation, the best body information creates a constitutional value, then we see why people will create something and call it a constitution. They value what they have seen, but yet they may have the wrong attitude and the wrong interpretation of what they see. Huh? Unless they are blind to the fact, and unless they are hypocritical in their nature, that they will misuse their intellect, or unless they are not as intelligent as one may give themselves to think that they are. Huh? So if that's the case, then there is the desensitization process of feelings being desensitized and thoughts demoralized, then therefore the attitude becomes dehumanized. Huh? And then we see how we interact with one another in a very insensitive manner, in a very immoral manner, in a very dehumanizing manner. That the language in which we say to one another, it becomes devitalized because we're not listening to one another anyway. Huh? And therefore it concludes again that we're living in a word oppressive environment. That people use words to oppress one another. Yes. And then therefore we use words to impress one another, then there creates a crime. Huh? Because you're supposed to be about your word, and the biggest crime one can commit is fraud. So we're dealing with fraudulent behavior. When we're dealing with fraudulent behavior, we're dealing with fatalism. Huh? The worst. How can you take the best and give people the worst? So your heaven, another person's heaven, which is elevated thinking really, becomes someone else's hell, and hell is anything that boxes you in. But they're both states of conditions, as some was called, because we are born in a condition, placed in a situation, surrounded by circumstances, consequently due to some previous activity that's taken place. So we're dealing with technology, the social, cultural science. We are industrious people. We're agriculturalist people. We are communicators. We are promoters. We are cultivators. If we look at it in a sense of how money, wealth, power, and greed, and how the misuse of the technology, and how it is really programming people to demean, demise, degrade, disrespect, and ultimately destroy this planet Earth. The toxins that are being put in the air, and the pollution that is being put in, the toxins that is being put in the water. And I want to mention the toxins that is being put in our minds and in our bodies and what we see. The day of conclusion. If we look at it in the athletic field, how many so-called what they call Super Bowls or championship games, how far can you go in that? How many Olympics? How far can you go? Whereas that there is a lack of accountability of people staying in touch with their humanity and the humanity of the world in a global society, in the world of an abundance. Losing touch with reality because someone who is giving you their reality and saying this is the reality that I'm going to give to the world is called culture hegemony. Well, perception is not reality, but is on its way to reality. The day of conclusion. What I'm trying to say is that the manipulating techniques have been exhausted. The manipulating techniques by those who control the means of productivity, media, press, and television, who determine these terms in a word-pressive environment, minimum wage, fixed income, determine who gonna get this, who gonna get that. Man, those manipulating techniques, man, they are exhausted. So the duty of the conscious is to make the unconscious aware of their unconscious behavior. That was Kwame Ture. So don't be tricked into a point of wanting this fame and this fortune when it throws you off the track. Because people want to live a meaningful life. People want to feel valued. People want to be appreciated. People want decent living, decent housing, decent schools, decent education, be treated with decency. The day of conclusion is when the laborers rise up against the capitalists. The day of conclusion is when the common folks rise up against those who consider themselves to think more highly of themselves than they ought to. The day of conclusion is when the level of consciousness of people are rising up every day. The day of conclusion. The day of conclusion is when the technology that is being used will be used to benefit the greater good for the development of one's intellect, for the betterment of humanity. The day of conclusion. The day of conclusion when decent common folk like a Fannie Lou Hamer says, I'm tired of being sick and tired. The day of conclusion, when we know that people have their struggles with any form of addiction, but yet out of that addiction and that which they may be having a struggling with, they would know that there is something strange when you take a bite of the fruit and look at the fruit. Strange fruit. And that which was kicked out of the garden was the attitude. So it is the attitude that is being strange. And when the attitude is strange, that means there is a people that are suffering from cognitive dissonance. And they themselves are incoherent. In order for them to be somewhat coherent, they need to make the masses of people incoherent, that they cannot see what is right before their eyes. And one thing about a hypocrite, he or she refuses to look in the mirror and face who he is and what he or she has become. And when he or she is unable to do that, it creates three illnesses: mental suicide, emotional homicide, and spiritual genocide, cutting through the life force of success when it comes to living a meaningful life for the development of one's intellect, for the betterment of humanity. So God is a thought that materializes from the mind. Bless, a measure of increase, and it could be decrease. Eulogy, the child. Children are the extension of their parents' social relationship. The planet Earth is a sociological structure. Who are their guides? It's what? Own up to its responsibility. Huh? You got it. You got it. We got it. As humans, and be a complementary to the earth, this plane of existence, this farmland, cultivated to make it better, not worse, but better when it comes to one's humanity. Because people are only responding to the extent and the injury